Well, I mean, initially, whenever it went down and seeing certain people's tweets and certain people that we work with tweets and being irate and being upset and, going off about it, my first initial thought was, what the hell did people expect? Like, some people, I felt like it caught them by surprise. Like, you knew that they were going to extend him. You knew that they weren't going to just let him ride out the last year of his deal and then, just go from there. Like, he was going to get extended. We always bring this up. He hasn't had a losing season. Like, I mean, I don't understand. Like, why can't we meet in the middle? And we talked about this before the show. There's a lot of people like the Rich Eisens of the world that think that Mike Tomlin is God. And a lot of NFL Network and, obviously the national people think Mike Tomlin is God. And then there are the people that think that he's horrible and that he sucks and then that they should move on. Why can't we ever meet in the middle?
Yep.
Like, I don't know that many people can meet in the middle and say, like, he is what he is. He's a really good coach. He hasn't had a losing season, so he always keeps his teams in it. But even if you ask him, and you said this offline too, he'll even say that it hasn't been good enough. And I think that we can recognize that it hasn't been good enough. They haven't won playoff games, but he also does keep his team in it. So how can you really part ways and not give a guy like that a chance, and especially the history of the Steelers, having 3 head coaches in the last 60-plus years? Like, that they are going to ride this out probably as long as Tomlin wants to ride this out. Like, and that's just the facts. They are going to do that. I don't know if they think that they owe him that, but they know that he is going to give them what they ultimately want, and that is to be and to have the opportunity to win playoff games.
I think they look at it that the last few years, they weren't necessarily in rebuild mode, but they knew in their heart of hearts, if given truth serum, that they weren't going to be a legitimate contender. And so, despite Art Rooney II using that word urgency this offseason, in spite of a lot of different ways the Steelers have operated than they usually operate this offseason, I think they internally look at the last few years and say, hey, well, we didn't bottom out. Mike Tomlin actually did a good job. And I don't agree with that, but I can see why they would say it. So I'll start, for me, with some of the good things for Tomlin. To your point, never had a losing season. We know this. You are never going to be out of it with Mike Tomlin at head coach. I don't care if Duck Hodges is your quarterback, Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, Michael Vick. He's going to have the team competitive. My problem, I guess I'll go quickly off the nice thing, is the ceiling of the Steelers is the floor. Finkel is Einhorn. It seems like every year you know what you're getting, and you're not getting much more than 9-8. He's going to be around it. They're going to be in it. Mike Tomlin has only coached one meaningless game in his career. One. That's it. One game where they were eliminated before the final week of the season. There absolutely is value in that. That is important. But it's not the be-all, end-all. And so you are 100% right. We should have seen this coming. We knew that they weren't going to have Mike Tomlin be a lame duck head coach. I did want to see it, though. I wanted him to have to sing for his supper the way that, at least to this point, it seems like they want Cam Hayward to sing for his supper. This should be the year where you, at bare minimum, win a playoff game, and I wish that they would wait until the end of the year to give him the contract. You either win a playoff game or you're not the head coach. It was never going to be that way, but they did so many other things this offseason that they don't usually do that I would have liked to see it. Hey, man, you ain't won a playoff game in 7 years. That's not acceptable for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Go out there and do it this year. Because if they go 2-14 now, he's not going anywhere. They won't. If they go 7-10 next year, he's not going anywhere. He's going to be here for 3 years no matter what. Where's the accountability? That's the part that kind of drives me nuts.
Maybe him singing for a supper is what he did this offseason. Maybe it's totally different. Maybe he just is like, okay, like I will go outside of the box and we will do things differently. And it's like, okay, well, if you do that and you operate differently, then that is singing for your supper, and then we will extend you even longer than we probably planned.
What an incredible point by you.
I mean, think about it, right? I mean, and you also have to align, and I'm sure, like Arthur Smith, being a former head coach and being, a part of one of the biggest business families ever, I'm sure that was a question that he had. whenever he got hired or whenever he was interviewing, how long is Mike Tomlin going to be around?
Yeah.
So for him to have be comfortable, he has to know that the head coach is going to be here for at least 3 years, right? So, I mean, the writing was on the wall. Whatever Arthur Smith deal was, I think it was probably aligned with Tomlin because he was like, I need some security as well. But honestly, like with him hiring or being a part of the process or even giving up the point, being the point man of hiring, that was singing for a sumper. Hiring Arthur Smith, hiring a new receivers coach, Justin Fields, that being a part of that process, being a part of Russell Wilson, getting, Patrick Queen, some of the different things that we've seen this offseason that we've never seen, maybe that's a part of Mike Tomlin kind of backing off a little bit or being like, I'm all in to whatever everybody else wants to do.
That is a really, really good point. One that I had not considered. It's why I like that we don't talk too much before the show about what we're going to talk about, because you make me think every single day. What I would say to that is you might be 100% right. That might be exactly what happened here. Mike, if you're going to come back, if we're going to do this contract extension, new coordinator, new this, new that, we're operating totally differently. You might have to cede some of your power here. That might be exactly what they've done. But what I would say to that is if you need to do all those things to give a guy a contract extension, maybe you shouldn't be giving that guy the contract extension if you're picking up what I'm putting down. You've got to change everything else around the guy so that you can then say, okay, we'll keep the guy. That seems like flawed process to me. And it's not to say Mike Tomlin's a bad coach. He's not. He's probably, as Mark just tweets in, he's probably a top 10 to 12 coach in the NFL. I'm guessing they're going to be paying him top 5 money, though.
Oh, yeah.
That's just the cost of doing business. I don't know that if he is paid top 5, though, that he deserves to be paid top 5. You've now reshuffled everything around him. You might be ignoring one of the key problems in Mike Tomlin, who has for so long done things his way. The hiring of Matt Canada was a Mike Tomlin decision, and it was a grievous mistake. He had multiple opportunities to fire him, didn't. And then we've been told when Matt Canada was fired, that was not a Mike Tomlin decision. Mike Tomlin juggling quarterbacks last year. The best quarterback on the roster was the last guy that he played. That's a Mike Tomlin mistake. Mm-hmm. When Najee Harris got hurt in the final preseason game, when he was injured going into the game, and he was supposed to be your best offensive player, and you have to dig out of a hole, that's a Mike Tomlin problem. Now, he's got this habit of pulling rabbits out of a hat in salvaging seasons, but it's almost like he sabotages the season to begin with. It's quite the trick he's done, where things are bad for a time, and you go, oh boy, the Steelers, well, they're not that good, and the roster's flawed, this, that, the other, to borrow his icism. Look at the recovery. Well, you shouldn't have had to recover. Like, you shouldn't have lost to Arizona. You shouldn't have lost to New England. You shouldn't have lost to Indianapolis so that there was a miraculous turnaround at the end of the year. You just should have been winning those football games to begin with. I think it's a complicated discussion, and to go all the way back to your initial statement, Dorin, one where nuance is not really found. He sucks. He's great. Where's the middle ground? There is middle ground here. If Mike Tomlin were to be fired, now to borrow this from Rich Eisen and scores of other national media members, he would be hired immediately because he is a good coach. But that to me is not a good enough justification to say you can't ever consider firing him, if that makes sense.
It is hard to ignore if you're Art the Second. It's hard to ignore. Now, I know that there's the Rich Eisens of the world that we just went through, the talking heads. You can ignore them. I mean, you don't really care what they have to say. They're not in the building. You know, they're talking on TV for a reason, and it is what it is. You can ignore the negative people. But one thing that you can't ignore is whenever somebody like Micah Parsons, who's playing for the Dallas Cowboys, said that if he were to play for any other team, that he'd want to play for Mike Tomlin in the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's stuff that you can, like those little things like that, like you can ignore the highs of Mike Tomlin, you can ignore the lows of other people, but whenever players that are on competitive teams say that if they had to pick somewhere to go, that they go to play for Mike Tomlin, and you don't extend them, or you fire him, or you part ways, that's just too hard to ignore. And it's almost a consensus around the league for players.
He's always top of that list. When I think it's the Athletic that does it. Who's the coach that you'd most like to play for? He's always at the top of the list.
And that is low-key hard to ignore. Now, nobody's going to want to hear that right now, but that's just the facts. And that's why he keeps his teams in it, and that's why he's getting extended right now, in my opinion. Is because people and players, they respond to him. And he gives them a chance. And that's all you can really ask for in the NFL. Now, you would like to see more wins and significant wins.
Yes.
No, you would like to see significant wins, not more wins. Significant wins.
When's the last time they won a truly massive game? 2016?
Yeah.
I mean, regular season games matter, and there are big regular season games, but this is not a franchise built on regular season wins. This is a franchise where you go, 05, you beat the Indianapolis Colts. In 94, you go to the Super Bowl, and yada, 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 95. This is a trophy case organization, and you can't get a trophy if you can't win a playoff game. And a lot of people, and I did it already this segment, have brought up the most recent few years where it's just mediocre as mediocre gets. The biggest failure, I think, of Mike Tomlin's career isn't these last few years. It's that they were 7-2-1 in a season and didn't make the playoffs.
Right.
It's that they lost playoff games with regularity with the Killer Bees in a roster that was touted around football as one of the best in the sport, if not at least top-end talent, the best. He didn't make good on that era. And then you follow up that era of underachieving with an era where you don't have as much talent, but you're not getting anything from that either.